So, your theme for the summer is beauty, and of course there's a lot that can be said about the role of the aesthetic in worship and the importance of beauty in religion and spiritual life. Religion inspires both visual art, poetry and prose, and music, and the last is often quite distinctive. It's easy, for example, to identify Gregorian chants, and we immediately associate them with Catholic worship in the Middle Ages. The music of Bach and Handel is never confused with the music you hear in synagogues, which is almost always in minor keys. And then there's a whole separate world of non-Western music to be heard in the temples of India, Tibet, and Japan. We're mindful of the drumming and singing of the American Indian traditions and the altogether unique sounds of Africa, blended as they are with the music injected there by European missionaries. There are UU songs, our hymnal being stuffed with them, and some have become important in the larger culture. The most popular is probably, oddly enough, Jingle Bells, which we think of as a Christmas song, although the words say absolutely nothing about Christmas at all. Really, it could be a Thanksgiving song, and some say that it actually was written for Thanksgiving. Or it could be a January song or just a general snow song. But for whatever reason, we now associate it with Christmas. It was written by the Unitarian James Lord Pierpont, who lived from 1822 to 1893. Pierpont was a Massachusetts native whose father was the noted writer and abolitionist, the Reverend John Pierpont, who served several Unitarian congregations. Alas, in contrast to his abolitionist family, Pierpont, the author of the song, served in the Confederate Army and composed other songs like Strike for the South. So he ended up embarrassing us. The other prominent song of the winter holiday season, which we claim is by the Unitarian minister, the Reverend Edmund Hamilton Sears, who wrote, "It Came Upon the Midnight Clear" in 1849. Ken Sawyer writes in UU World that his song is notable for its focus not on Bethlehem, but on his own time, and on the ever-contemporary issue of war and peace. Written in 1849, it has long been assumed to be Sears's response to the just-ended Mexican-American War, which was, basically an imperialist adventure. Sears's pacifism would take second place to his commitment to abolishing slavery in the Civil War, but his carol remains repeated all over the world every year. Probably more than any other Christmas carol, it talks about today, his day and our day. It says that the call to peace and goodwill to all is as loud on any other day as it was on that midnight of old, if only we would just listen in solemn stillness. This point of view can be a little disconcerting to some Christians who note that the angel's song doesn't have anything in particular to do with Jesus, and Jesus is never mentioned in the song. Indeed, some Christians have tried to have this carol removed from their hymnals because it doesn't say anything about Jesus. Others have simply rewritten the last verse to give Jesus a larger role. And ironically, in all of this, Sears was considered to be theologically conservative in his day. Now, there are certainly others. The Unitarian Noel Regney wrote, "Do You Hear What I Hear?" during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. In a time when many were afraid, that song also calls for peace. Said, "The King to the people everywhere, listen to what I say. Pray for peace, people everywhere." I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day is a Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem. Longfellow was a founding member of the Unitarian congregation in Brunswick, Maine, and his brother Samuel Longfellow was a Unitarian minister. This is just the tip of the iceberg, of course. Our tradition is filled with not only UU composers and lyricists, but poets and authors who simply rewrote the words to traditional tunes. This is a long-standing tradition in folk music, and we should not be surprised to see many examples of this in our liturgies. After all, our national anthem is just new words written to an English drinking song. All the more ironic because the words that we use were written in response to the British Navy's bombarding our country with cannon fire. So we responded by stealing their song. You gotta like it. Now our hymnal denotes UU composers and lyricists with the little flaming chalice symbol at the bottom of each page, at the end of each hymn. So, for example, if you wanted to turn to hymn number 2, the second page, you would see, just down the ages we have trod, the little flaming chalices right there next to words and music. And that means that both the words and the music were written by UUs. Oops. I hope I didn't just destroy it. Okay. On the opposite page, hymn number 3, Fred Wooden, a very prominent minister, has put a poem to original music. And if you leaf through the pages of the hymnal, you'll see many, many examples of our hymns that are by UUs, and I'm quite gratified by that. Have so many. But today I thought we could take a short trip into UU art and artists. You know, if you've ever been a guest in a Jewish home, it's really usually pretty obvious from the art on the wall that this is a Jewish home. And Christian homes are often quite recognizable from artwork depicting Jesus. So what might UU art be, and would it identify our homes as UU if we had some in it? And I've assembled a slideshow because what's the point of talking about art if we're not going to see any? Well, perhaps, oddly enough, the most famous name in the UU name in the art world is not an artist, as much as a publisher of art, Nathan Currier, of Currier and Ives fame. He was raised Unitarian in Massachusetts. He was a member of All Souls in New York City. So anytime you see a Currier and Ives print, you can think of that, Unitarian. Probably the most famous American Unitarian painter was N.C. Wyeth, who as an adult was an active member of the Unitarian congregation in Wilmington, Delaware. His children, including the even more famous painter Andrew Wyeth, were raised in the RE program there, but as seems to happen, alas, too often, none of them apparently remained active as adults, as UUs or Unitarians in those days. This image is part of a series commissioned by the Layman's League, which was what we called the men's group in those days. The series was to illustrate the parables of Jesus, and a book did in fact result, and it is still available. Art is not limited to painting, of course, and another aspect of art is our buildings themselves. The architect Frank Lloyd Wright is the obvious example, and his work is so well known that I need not spend any time on it. Here, he designed 2 Unitarian Universalist facilities, First Society in Madison and Unity Temple in Oak Park, also a Greek Orthodox church in Wauwatosa, and a Reformed synagogue in Pennsylvania. All of these buildings still stand. Our buildings, of course, often include art, classically in the form of the windows. This picture of the sower at Channing Memorial in Newport, Rhode Island, is theologically very Unitarian. It calls to mind the seeds of knowledge being spread across the land. Now this beautiful window in our Rockford, Illinois building calls to mind not only our own symbol of the flaming chalice, but the sources of our faith and the pluralistic world we share with other religions. The chalice is a relatively modern symbol, having been created during the World War II era as a way to identify the Unitarian Service Committee and its workers who were trying to get Jewish children out of Germany and other Nazi-controlled areas. Since then, it has become our central symbol and has inspired many variations by many artists. Here is a stained glass version created by the UU artist Kat Liu, inspired by the Fibonacci sequence. And moving along to other chalices, you know, you can find them just everywhere. Here's a poster of variations. A sculpture, slightly more impressionistic, painting, a graphic design which is about social justice, the rainbow, and some items which allow you to display a chalice in your home or on your body. That's a table lamp on the left, obviously a men's tie on the right. So, this painting was commissioned by a UU to illustrate a religious education lesson on a Native American folk tale explaining why the crow's feathers are black. Originally, the crow's feathers were a rainbow of colors, but when winter came and all the animals were cold, the crow was assigned the task of bringing fire as a gift from the Creator. During the journey, the crow's feathers were burned black. So in this very UU painting, the fire is clearly in a UU chalice. The chalice appears in many inspirational posters, as we see in this design, suitable for your refrigerator. You can find a wide variety on a Facebook page called UU Media Works. And we are even into the coloring book genre, which is experiencing a certain popularity among adults and children. Several designs are suitable for printing and including in a children's visitor packet, which more congregations are creating to give the children of visitors, similar to the way the restaurants give out crayons and a placemat for the younger set. There are graphics available for pretty much any theology we might find in our congregations. I'm particularly fond of this call to live every day in a spiritually aware state. That's this one. The 7 principles might be a suitable piece for a bare spot on your wall. And here's one focusing on the 7th principle. Unless we think art is serious, here are some UU, that's the 7th principle one. Okay, so here are some UU Valentines. These are on the UUA website, and presumably you can print them out, and cut them out, and give them out. So. Art can be whimsical too, you know. I don't want to ignore contemporary UU arts and their art. I have just a few examples to demonstrate the breadth of what is out there. This is a very large piece, 4 feet high and 12.5 feet wide. It's about climate change, and the artist is a UU in Salt Lake City. This flower, reminiscent of Georgia O'Keeffe, is by a UU in Florida. This mixed media piece by a UU minister calls to mind the sources of our faith and our interconnectedness. This piece was painted for our congregation in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, and is an express exposition of the themes our faith emphasizes. Here's a much more abstract piece calling to mind Buddhist meditation by a Seattle UU. This is also a very large piece, 7 feet high by 24 feet wide, by a UU in Dallas, Texas. So, cold wax on paper, that must have been interesting to do. Okay. This is a quilt with applique made by the members of our Louisville congregation, because art can certainly be a collective effort as well. The Tree of Life, of course, is a religious symbol in many traditions. And it's not just paintings. You know, I'm not that well informed about pottery and ceramics, but apparently this artist was a well-known master in the ceramic art community. He was a UU in the Detroit area. And this is by a Toronto UU who was a member of a group of artists known as the Canadian Seven, Arthur Lismer. This artist was born to a Navajo mother and a European American father. He was actually started out as a congregational minister himself, and then he became UU, and he founded Los Lunas UU Fellowship, which is a prison ministry. And this is a fiber piece by Virginia UU, another strong social justice theme. So that's just a taste of the breadth and depth of UU art. Our art may illustrate our roots, it may illustrate our principles, it may illustrate our goals or our symbols, but whatever its themes, it can reinforce our religious spirits. I've just kind of scratched the surface here briefly, but I hope I've inspired some research, which these days means internet search. Maybe some of you will even be inspired to create some art, maybe for here. And if so, I have succeeded. Thank you, and blessed be. It's the summer, so the sermon is short.
You're not going to hear complaints. It's another beautiful day.